I left this on the table. Maybe I left it on for a reason. Do you mind handing me that, and I'll toss it behind here in my very good filing system. This happens to be here because I wrote it yesterday. We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. T.S. Eliot. That's a big one for me.
That is on my website.
Is it? You're kidding.
It's one of my favorites.
Well, maybe that's why it was on the table, waiting for you.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. You have your tea.
I am set.
We're all set up. We're recording. Whether or not we use the video doesn't matter.
Okay.
It's just there. So
Are you in?
We'll forget about it.
We're cozy.
Yeah, we're cozy. We're in the booth, baby. So I was saying a moment ago that my old paradigm would have had me stressing in a way about this conversation beforehand, partly because I would really want to do it justice, and partly because I would be nervous about the emotional volume, or the volume of emotion, I guess, and I'm over those things. And I just wanted to create a space where we could have an exchange of ideas and hearts, minds, and memories, maybe.
Wow.
So
it's an honor to be here with you. And what do the kids call it? Leaving you on red?
I don't know what that means.
When someone sends a message and you don't respond.
Oh, on red.
No, it's on. Is it on red or on red? Anyway, I realized driving here that we've been planning this for months, and similarly, I have been unconsciously putting it off out of fear that I might dissolve into tears. And so I'm just showing up.
Yeah.
Whatever happens, happens.
Right on, sister. And it seems to me you are probably at a place in your journey where emotion doesn't frighten you. That's how it seems to me from a distance.
Interesting. I committed a long time ago to be transparent in my life, so yes. I am comfortable with emotion, but I'm still a recovering perfectionist.
Oh.
So, yeah.
We have that in common.
Yeah, cheers.
Here's to the recovering part.
Right.
It's, oh my gosh. It's like one of those weighted blankets.
Right.
And you do have to crawl out from under it.
Oh my gosh, what a beautiful image. And then crawl back under, because it is a source of comfort. Yeah.
So the thought I had this morning was about grief. And I have had a lot of experience with grief in my life and have thought a lot about it. And I feel like it's part of my journey to understand it better and to maybe help other people understand it. And that's a big part of why I wanted to do this conversation. But my thought this morning was that grief is a noun, but grieving is a verb. And I've been watching you, albeit through social media, I've been watching you do it as a verb and show the world how to make it a verb. Does that resonate with you?
Yes, and it's so interesting because I think this time around, so I lost my brother 2.5 years ago, and having most recently lost my sister 6 months ago now, I've kind of, speaking of weighted blankets, I've lived under this family paradigm that you present a certain face. and that, you know, my parents were leaders in the community, and we were very much a respected family in our community. And so I grew up kind of fearing of not saying the right thing. And my grief journey with Jonathan was very imperfect. And there was, you know, anger and resentment, and as there is with grief. And some family members grieve very privately, and I didn't grieve terribly outwardly, but I was very much engaged with my community. And I think this time it is so huge. Like, the event was just so colossal. And I was thinking last night, you know, there were thousands of people affected by Lisa's death alone. And by 22, 23 lives, it's, the grief is so profound that I thought, I am going to do this outwardly in hopes of helping, because there's so much pain. Yeah.
It was an extraordinary, horrific moment for Nova Scotia. And I feel like, you know, I wrote a poem at the time in which I said, we are bruised. Like, the province is bruised by this.
That
like,
was beautiful.
It just feels so, it felt so
That was a powerful
overwhelming for all Nova Scotians. And yet, as with so many hard things, the flip side of that was that people came together with such a sense of love. And I'm sure you felt that outpouring of love and concern for you and your family.
Oh, people didn't know what to do. There was just so much pain. And so they, you know, I think about karma and how every action has an equal and opposite reaction. And it's like we were a part of such a dark and evil act. And the opposite of that is so much immense love, and that's what we were showered with. And yeah, the gifts that were dropped off on our doorstep was ongoing for months. We have a community in New Brunswick that we teach educators on yoga and mindfulness. And so about a week after it happened, we received 2 massive boxes from our community in New Brunswick. And these are people who can't readily go out and shop. So it was a lot of handmade, heartfelt gifts, and the list just goes on and on. There was a manager in the 10 Talon Canadian Tire who is a single mom and was so heartbroken that she donated a significant amount of money out of her own pocket and to Lisa's children. And then the Canadian Tire Corporation found out about it and reimbursed her. And it's just, you know, the gifts, just the generosity that poured forth is, it was immeasurable.
So at the same time, I guess I want to ask, did your story and your loss being so public make it easier or harder? Because I can see how both could be the case. You couldn't escape it.
I think, to circle back to my first piece that I said about grieving and how I'm grieving more publicly with Lisa's death than I did with Jonathan's, I think that it has been important for me. You know, I'm in regular therapy because I actually acquired PTSD from Jonathan's death. And so it was really important for me to to move through it and not let it get stuck or lodged,
Yeah.
and to reach out for support. And everyone grieves differently. And so for me, that's kind of been, a friend gave me a card. She works at the IWK, Shauna Wilcox, and she gave me this beautiful card that it was a list of our grieving rights. And I just loved that we have a right to be angry, we have a right to be public, we have a right to be reclusive, we have a right to say no. And that was just so important for me to say, okay, this is really big. I'm having really big feelings, and I have a right to it all.
And you have a right to grieve in your own personal way. And it may be different than anyone or everyone else around you,
Yes.
but it's yours.
That was transformative for me, to really own my own, the way that I needed to grieve. Because I think I tried to grieve in a certain way with Jonathan, the loss of him. And yeah, it gave me issues.
Did Jonathan die of cancer? Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was a quick journey.
It was quick. It was 3 months, and yeah, it was just really shocking and hard for everyone. And he was, 6'5", big, hulky guy, outdoorsy. He was the director of forestry for Nova Scotia, and loved by all. So devastating.
And there were 3 kids in your family. What were you like as children?
So yes, I was the baby, but Mom had 3 of us within 3 years.
Oh. As a mother, that makes me sharp intake of breath.
I have 2
Wow.
when they're 2.5 years apart, and I just can't even imagine. But yeah, they did a lot.
Here's to your mother.
Yeah, I know. She's a warrior. I think, we grew up so close in age that they were a really, really big part of my life. And yeah, Jonathan was the proverbial older brother who had all the answers. He was like my wisdom figure. And Lisa was the boss. She was the boss. She had everything under control. And so that, I think, is why, one of the reasons why her death has been so hard for me, because it's like she's the one that would take care of everything. And I had to sit down and write her eulogy and take care of not all of it, our family did, but it was a strange role for me to take, because she was the one that would have done all of that, and who largely did all of that for Jonathan's death. Yeah.
So you were without a rudder all of a
Yes.
sudden. And what did I guess I want to ask how she grieved Jonathan's death, and what that did to help you through it. While you think about this, I want to say 2 things that move me right now. One, I love the fact that you said, I'm in therapy, because anytime I hear someone say that out loud, I kind of celebrate. It's like, little fireworks go off for me that yes, because that's what we need to have a dialogue about that. But I don't know anyone in my life who wouldn't benefit from therapy, having the opportunity to sit down with someone and be able to talk about their deepest, darkest desires, fears, shames, without any fear of that being, spoken again by them. But I also love your relationship to the pause. And I didn't want to interrupt your thinking, but I do presentation coaching with people, and it's one of the things that, in that sort of realm, that I like to help people come to a comfort level with the pause, because it can be so powerful. But it also gives us an opportunity when we're expressing something meaningful to really go deep and be honest rather than pour words out before we're ready.
Yes.
And the words come from a deeper place and they're more impactful. So you can go back to thinking, go back to your pause if you like, but I just wanted to honor that while it was happening.
Thank you. It comes from many years of speaking impulsively and then regretting what I said afterward, or realizing that it didn't come out the way I wanted it to. And as I mentioned, I'm a mindfulness teacher, and so I call it the, be sure to invest in RBC, and that's the relax, breathe, and choose.
Love it.
Isn't it great?
Yeah, RBC. They would love to have you as a poster girl. They would want you to choose them.
Right.
Yeah.
So
relax, breathe, choose.
Yeah. So I am learning to do that, especially in forums like this, where I know I can't take my words back. And to be honest, Lisa and I had a fairly contentious relationship at the end of our lives together. And so we all grieved differently, and we moved away from each other after Jonathan's death. And by the grace of God or the goddess, we had come back together 3 or 4 months before she was killed. And we were back texting daily, and that is an immense gift that I will forever be grateful for. So we did, in some way, have closure, and
Let's talk about something I think you had in common. I remember reading an article by a friend, a long-lost friend of Lisa's, in the newspaper.
Yes.
I read it online.
Yes.
And she described Lisa, and she talked about her desperate loss of the realization that she had lost that friendship a long time ago by not tending it like a garden, and yet she had so much love that she felt for her, and grief upon her death. And she, in describing Lisa, said she said things like gosh and golly in an age group, 18, 19-year-olds, where that wasn't cool. And she also talked about meditation and prayer when it wasn't cool. And I wonder about how that was that a common experience for the two of you, that you grew into a relationship with meditation or even mysticism together? Or was one or the other of you ahead, shining the light on the path?
As you're speaking, I'm becoming really clear that Lisa, she was my teacher in so many ways. And we shared a room for 17 years. And I think that she was very spiritual. We were all very spiritual. We grew up in the United Church. My mom was a minister. And in so many ways, Lisa would open doors for me and say, here's a path. And then I'd pursue it, and I'd go down and down and down. And that's how I really found my dharma, my life purpose, is from her guidance. And so she introduced me to yoga many years ago, and we were living in Vancouver. It's a funny story. Do you want to hear it?
Yeah.
So we were grieving the loss of my parents' relationship. They divorced when I was 19 and she was 20. And so we ventured out west to kind of find ourselves and heal. And
You drove across the country, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, I remember reading that.
yes, and so her healing modality was yoga, and she was practicing Kundalini yoga. And I was a phys ed teacher at Kitsilano High at the time, and beyond cool. Nancy, I was cool.
I have no doubt about that whatsoever. You're cool to me now, so I believe you were cool then in a different way.
Right. I was, jockey cool,
Yeah.
with attitude.
Been there, done that.
Right. She invited me to attend one of her yoga classes, and I refused until she said that there's a really hot teacher teaching and she was interested in him. So I attended the class and I unrolled my mat at the back of the room, and this guy came out and he had a white turban on, and everyone's mats were like this far away from each other, and I was just looking around, the windows were fogging up, and they were on their hands and knees, and they were arching and curling their spines, and then he started chanting, and I was kind of looking around like, this is a little bit much. And then he invited everyone to relax their anal sphincter, and they all farted in unison.
They, not we.
Not
they
me.
all farted. Let's be clear.
I just left everything. I left my keys, I left my bag, and I just recoiled away from my mat and slid out the exit and didn't come back to yoga for 2 years.
They scared you away with their flatulence.
They did. And so I had to find the right style for me. Mm-hmm. I was tight from all of my athletic endeavors, and so then I found the style that was right, and it blossomed from there, and before I knew it, it was my soul's calling. And so, in many ways, Lisa, she was like, she dangled the carrot in front of me, and then, ironically, many years later, she would attend my yoga teacher training program and be certified by me, so.
Full circle.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How would you describe Lisa?
She was such a vibrant force, her best friend said that in the past when she would enter a social situation with friends or family, she was very extroverted, and she would have to kind of take care of people and make sure they are introduced to people, and she said that when she entered a room with Lisa, she was like, go. And Lisa would just work the room and, ignite the space with energy. And that's what she did wherever she went.
I think a lot about the metaphor of light within, and how as we go through our lives, we tend to relight the light that was so strong when we were babies and toddlers that we dimmed as we got into adolescence, and I think for so many people that dimmer gets turned all the way down and has to be at some point discovered and turned back up again. It sounds to me like she was pretty full of her own light, even that she would talk openly when she was a teenager about meditation and prayer when no one else was finding that cool. Does that describe her? I don't want to put words in your mouth. I'm just curious if when you think of that kind of metaphor, I'm thinking about seeing her on camera during the lockdown with her 2 kids playing ukulele.
I know.
And seeing, as we were talking before we started, seeing her show up just so fully.
She really did. She was so crazy creative in her teaching and her parenting, and energetic. She was so energetic and just really, who was it? She sucked the marrow out of life. Who was it said that? Was it Thoreau? But that was her. She really did just maximize every moment, and it was infectious.
So when you describe her, you use the word is. So what is your relationship with the essence of Lisa now?
Wow, did I?
You did.
That's crazy.
I don't think so. I guess
Wow, I do feel her. It's like she's beyond the veil.
Mhm.
But I feel her presence really strongly. I have this, will I reveal this now? Sure. At the risk of being, called crazy.
I know, you got to come out of the
Yeah.
spiritual closet
Yeah.
in stages sometimes, don't you? That's how I feel.
Well, it's like an accidental gift, and it's not refined or skilled, but I have this ability to connect with people as they're passing and directly after. So it's that, a few days before, and then 3 weeks after, I feel them like they're closer to me than when they were alive. And yeah.
Do you have to do anything to access that? Do you have to be in meditation? Do you have to be in stillness? Or is it just something that happens?
My yoga and meditation practice certainly has amplified it, and my clean lifestyle certainly helps. I'm, an open vessel, and it has its downfalls. I'm highly sensitive, so the discord in the world really affects me. This massacre has probably affected me way more than other people because I feel so deeply. I'm so connected. So, it's not easy, but it's really interesting. And, Lisa and I, having shared our lives so intimately for so long, I feel her with me on a daily basis, and I make it a point to stay connected and to call on her. And so on the drive here, it's like, Lisa, we're going for an interview. We're doing this together. And some might call me crazy, but I do feel her with me, and it's so strange that I'm looking at that painting, and as I look at you, and that's in my peripheral vision, it's very much an outfit that Lisa wore when she was that age.
Oh.
And her hair was that length and the big cheekbones, so it's strange.
Wow.
It's like she is here.
And the funny thing is, it was an outfit I wouldn't have worn. My mother
Right.
must have wrestled me into that because I was always in slacks and, mismatched outfits. So I love that little synchronicity, and I definitely have truth bumps.
Yes.
I was talking to Lisa before you arrived as well, because I wanted to do this right and honor her.
Oh, I'm Nancy.
Oh, phew, that's what we're here for. And I think that it goes back to this again. This is the third time I've said this idea that Lisa talked about prayer and meditation among people who didn't have that vocabulary and weren't necessarily open to it. I think it's important to talk about mysticism and spirituality openly, because a lot of people hold these beliefs. Like, they do studies of people in the States, for instance. I saw something recently that 70% of Americans believe in angels.
Wow.
But no one talks about that.
Wow.
And I, like you, believe that the veil is just a veil. It's not a concrete wall, and it's like a fog bank.
Yeah.
And we
Yes.
can when we know that they're there, the fog lifts.
That's
And
beautiful.
well, it occurred to me when you were talking about how the massacre affected you in bigger ways than maybe you've even realized yet. I thought about 9/11 and how I've talked to people about in the past the way that the first day the gigantic tragedy hit us in like a huge wave.
It did.
But it wasn't for me until the next day when the personal stories started coming in. And all of a sudden, I started to cry. And I, like you, feel the pain of the world. And I've been told by people, well, just don't do that. Like, it's not how it works.
You can't just stop.
You can't just stop. And it just hit me so squarely that each personal story, that heartbreak in that, you know, number of lives and that whole world that person revolved in was multiplied by thousands. And I see that and I feel that with you, that you have the full trauma of the experience of that tragic loss, not just the loss, but the horrific aspect of it, and the fear that was, you know, bundled up in it. And you know that 21 other other people's families
Yes.
have gone through that. And that's a magnitude that is like a looming volcano.
It really is. Yeah, there's grief when someone has a long-term illness and they pass, and then there's traumatic grief that is caused from something like this, and it is so complex and so shattering. It really has shattered our family in so many ways, and I think for probably the first time in my adult life, I've given myself permission to press pause and not create, not produce. You know, I'm constantly coming up with ideas for the business and writing, and I've just given myself the last 6 months to be with it, because I don't want further PTSD, and I know that I need to be fully present to this, to honor her and to honor me and to honor our connection, our relationship that we shared.
And that takes a lot of letting go of self-judgment when you've come from being a perfectionist.
Yes.
And
Yes.
is that a process? Is that a practice that you have to keep coming back to?
I think age helps. Yeah.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah.
I think that as the testosterone wanes, the drive also wanes. And so in my 20s and 30s, I was like, let's go, let's do this, let's make something, let's build an empire. And now being 48, I can feel a difference. Like, it's more of a willingness to sit with the moment and just savor the goodness. And I think that this, having lost both siblings, and it's in my face that we are finite beings. So I think all of it has kind of helped me to just rest and be. As Sumon Kid, I love her.
Oh, me too.
And she talks a lot about waiting, and I'm kind of waiting now. I know that there is something gonna come from this, and so I'm waiting and listening, and I think when in my past I've done a lot of kind of yang in terms of the yin and yang being the active movement driving force. I've conducted myself a lot in that way, and I'm now being more yin and just kind of letting it percolate and putting my ego aside. And I think that when we do that in our lives, we end up serving in the best way possible.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're not just indulging our ego, we're serving humanity, and that's kind of my place right now, is waiting and listening and acting from the guidance that I'm receiving. And so part of that listening is I've recently joined the Nova Scotia Remembers Legacy Society Working Group. So they're the ones, a small group of volunteers who started the Facebook group.
Wow.
That has 75,000 members.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a working group that is designed to create a memorial for the victims and the families. And it has been such a source of light for me, something to really kind of be a part of these incredible people who are just volunteering their time to make our lives better, and has given me hope for creating a healing space, a memorial. And so, yeah, I'm working on the 1-year anniversary right now. So that's kind of my thing that I've taken on, and I've got a group of 10 people that I'm working with, because it's going to be hard. The 1-year anniversary it's going to bring it all up for people. And so I think we have an opportunity to really come together, either in person or virtually, and start replacing the traumatic memories with healing and togetherness and community. So, yeah.
Well, that's a beautiful mandate.
Isn't it?
Yeah, and I know that you just went through the 6-month anniversary last week.
Yes.
I guess. And as I hear you talking about your grieving process, it occurs to me that you are grieving as a sister, but you're also grieving as a mother, and as an aunt, and as a daughter, and all of those different roles in your life frame grief in a different way.
Wow. Thank you.
Well, I'm just observing, and it's not something I thought of before. And I haven't lost a sibling. I've lost very close friends, and sister-in-law, and mother-in-law, and father-in-law, and so on, and father. But I'm just realizing that you experience this grief in different aspects of your personality and your roles in life, and that's. Some you might be doing better over here than you're doing over here, because maybe this aspect has a lot more anger attached to it. And I know I have been watching you through a lens of social media. I haven't seen you express anger, but as you mentioned yourself, anger is a necessary part of the emotion that moves through you when you're grieving.
Wow.
What kind of relationship do you have with anger? Can I ask that? And if you don't want to talk about it, that's obviously your prerogative too.
Yeah, thank you. I feel so seen. Thank you. And I am grieving my loss, but I remember Lisa living in Toronto for a period, and us walking along the waterfront, and we were both dreaming up our futures. And, we were saying, we were dreaming up our husbands, and how many kids we wanted, and what kind of house we wanted to live in. And so I am grieving that vision for her, that her life was taken from her. And this was a dream that she was fulfilling and living out. And that's such a massive loss. So I'm grieving for her. I'm grieving for her children, who it's just the unspeakable. And so there are so many. You're so right. I'm grieving for my children, who witnessed me 2 years ago grieve the death of my brother, and now this. One night, as I was curled up crying, and my girls have learned to just, come running. And it's so weird, I'm the mother, but they have been my midwives in many ways. And I remember one night, as Bella was holding me and stroking my hair, and I said, Bella, I really don't know why this has happened to us twice. and why you at such a young age are here supporting me through my grief. And she just said so wisely, well, maybe you're teaching me how to live.
Yeah.
And so with that, I think I realized, yeah, by me grieving and not resisting and, you know, tearing when I need to tear and weeping when I need to weep and wail when I need to wail, that I am teaching them about life and how to live fully and how to embrace it all. I don't know.
Oh, that's when you were describing that situation, all I saw was the gift that you are giving your children by showing them that allowing emotion is what we're meant to do.
Right.
And you know, in our parents' generations, when you had a loss, you acknowledged it and then stuffed down the grief. You didn't go to a therapist. You didn't talk about it. You just had to carry on.
And that's when trauma and grief can progress into PTSD. So.
Yeah. And illness.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I believe that, you know, when we demonstrate to our kids that embodying emotion, allowing emotion to move through us is like if you've got a sick stomach and you vomit, it is going to make you feel better. And if you don't and you hold it in, you're just going to feel horrible and it's going to become more of a problem. So I honor that relationship that you're guiding, you know, your children through, that experience that you're guiding them through right now. And I can't imagine that a lot of people listening will have had that kind of example set for them.
Well, I grew up with a parent who is depressed, and I think it really inspired me to seek out a career in health and well-being.
Mm.
And I remember Clarissa Pinkola Estes once saying that the opposite of depression is not happiness, it's expression.
Oh, that's one of my favorite sayings ever.
Stop it.
I swear, I wrote it yesterday. I'm writing a book and I wrote it down, but I didn't know who to attribute it to, so it has an asterisk by it.
Wow.
Because I just remember how it impacted me the first time I heard it. The opposite of depression is not happiness, it's expression.
Right.
Oh,
It's
it's like,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
incredible.
It's amazing.
And when you think of someone who is holding a lot of grief, anger, angst, whatever it is, inside and not expressing it, not talking about it, not doing art therapy or whatever way they get it moving, it is suffocating to think of that for me.
And in the yoga tradition, it's called ama, A-M-A. So ma means the mother, and nurturing, and the A in front means non. So that which is non-nurturing. So, yeah, built up emotion that is suppressed or repressed creates ama. And in the Western world, we don't really think of it a lot in that way, but it does. There are neurochemicals that, you know, emotion turns into our physicality. So, yeah, it's powerful stuff.
You know, Wayne Dyer put it in a very physical frame by holding an orange. Whenever he was on stage, he would have an orange on the table beside him and he would pick it up and he'd say, you know, if I squeeze this, what happens? And the audience would sort of go, well, you know, juice, or what will come out of it? And they would say juice, and he would say, what kind of juice? And people sort of chuckle and say, well, orange juice. And he would say, why? Pointedly. And of course he was getting at the fact that orange juice comes out of an orange when you squeeze it because that's what's in it. And when you squeeze a human being, what comes out of them is what's inside. And as you walk through your life, you can witness people who, when they're under pressure, what comes out of them is what's inside them. Anger or hurt or woundedness or,
Wow.
right? And it's a reminder that, oh yeah, we need to take care of what's inside us and turn inward at some point. And that's your specialty,
Wow. That's an incredible analogy.
Wayne.
Yeah.
There's a reason he was one of the best-selling
Legend.
New Thought self-help authors on the planet.
Yeah.
And you know, it's interesting because I called into a radio show one day. There was someone on CBC who was being interviewed, and it was the call-in show at noon. And this fellow was very well-meaning, and he was talking about his own book. But his book and his belief system was that self-help books are no help. And I called in to say I saw it differently, because I believe a lot of people consume self-help books but don't use them as tools. They don't do the work. It appeals to them, the idea, and sometimes people, you know, starting on a spiritual path will hear things and see quotes, and it's like something is calling to them, but they're not ready to integrate it into their life.
And apply it.
And
Yeah.
and I think that, you know, Wayne's books, for me,
Yes.
the ones that I've read, really shifted my perspective.
Yes.
And when I did the work to turn and look at my perceived flaws and my, you know, perceived shame even, it allowed me to say, oh, okay, I'm okay eventually. It's like the old book, I'm okay, you're okay.
Yes.
And until we arrive there, life is such a struggle. It's like we're in the shallow waves getting knocked over.
Wow.
And I'm just appreciative of the work you do in the world in general, introducing people to that inward journey through yoga and meditation. But it seems to me this experience of losing Lisa after losing Jonathan is opening up your ability to help others. So it's that flip side of the coin again. Do you feel there's an amplification of your, I don't know if you're calling or your personal power, I don't know how to put it.
Again, I'll circle back to this painting. So weird.
Yeah.
Because I was this one, right? Lisa spoke for me for the first 20 years of my life. I was so painfully introverted and shy.
Really?
And socially anxious, and she took the lead and would speak for me in so many instances. And so, yeah, here I am, the last lone survivor, and I feel a responsibility to them to amplify my voice, and to myself, to my own soul's purpose and what I have, you know, to contribute in the remaining years of my life, hopefully yours.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna break this cycle, Nancy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I will show a picture of the
Yeah.
of the painting in the video and explain that it's me on the right, that dressed like you say Lisa would be dressed.
Yeah.
And it's Laura Graham on the left. And Laura was the daughter of Enocha Graham, who did the portrait, and they were our neighbors, and Laura was my best friend in elementary school.
Amazing.
And the story it tells to me is that, you know, she's totally bored, she's got her arms crossed and impatient. She's had her portrait done many, many times, and yet you could see I'm like, oh, I'm having my portrait done. Even though my mother, as I say, had to probably make me wear that
You look
skirt.
enthralled.
It's like, oh, I'm getting attention. I think that's what it was. It was because I was a kid who became totally addicted to praise and was always looking for any kind of spotlight I could find.
Wow.
Because I didn't feel my own light. And that became, isn't it interesting? It became my path. I was on TV
Yes.
with a spotlight being shone on me. And of course, the learning for me in the long run is that someone else shining a spotlight on you can't light you up.
Wow.
Until you can find your own light and embrace it.
When did you come to that realization?
Oh, maybe when I was your age.
Wow.
I'm 54. No, I started on this path probably. Perimenopause probably went hand in hand with this path. I would say I started shortly after I was 40, but really when I was 45, it started to become much more important to me.
That's amazing. Like, that's not even metaphorical.
Well,
That's quite literal.
Yeah, the spotlight.
Right.
Yeah, but I think that's true of a lot of people who seek the spotlight because it feels good. It's like a drug. It lights you up, but then it's not sustainable.
Yeah, that attention is satisfying to some degree, but yeah.
If someone else thinks you're special,
Yeah.
or holds the light on you and says you're special, then it's true for that period of time.
Yes.
And then you go back into the self flagellation that it's not true.
Yeah.
And that's I'm fascinated by how much that's part of the human condition.
Or the female.
The female
Yeah.
condition, yeah.
Part of our patriarchal upbringing, I think, or our patriarchal influence. Yeah.
Yeah, I have another poem that talks about how, we say to kids, be good, be quiet, behave, but we never just say be.
Right.
And
Love that.
that's part of what you are teaching people in the world through yoga and meditation. That is it.
Yeah.
And how do you, let's try this. How do you describe what yoga and meditation give you to people who are beginners on the path, who don't really get it, or people who aren't even on the path? How do you describe it? To try to, it's almost like baiting a hook, I guess, to help them understand, and then you've got to reel them in.
Yeah, I think it's in today's pace and the challenges, the immense challenges that we face, it's not a hard sell because so many people are hurting and suffering and stressed to the max, and they'll do anything. And so yoga and meditation is proven to connect us to our breath and to our body. And I always say, we have to live in here. There's nowhere else to live. And so many of us are cut off and living from the neck up. And driving here, this is a mindfulness practice of just tuning in and noticing how I'm holding my body. I'm a clencher. I wear a bike plate. I started after I gave birth to Sophia.
You're telling my story over and over again. Really? So did I.
Funny.
Clencher.
Like being a mother
comes with being a
was
perfectionist
terrifying.
as well.
Perfectionist,
There is no
control.
Oh, the collision of perfectionism and motherhood is excruciating.
It is.
Because you can find thousands and thousands of things to feel guilty about and beat yourself up that you're not doing well and you're not doing right.
Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
And so, I was driving here and noticed my energy come up here, and I was disconnecting. I was worried that, I could feel emotion surfacing, and so I was just like, remember, Jenny, nothing is more important at this point in my life. Nothing is more important than being in my body. I will never sacrifice my breath again for anything. And that is just my commitment to myself. And it's hard because living through this trauma, I'm noticing that I hold my breath. And so it's just a journey in self-compassion and continuing to apply what I know. But I think that's the biggie, is that connect that embodiment, and when we are disembodied, that's when we work ourselves to the point of illness, or we stuff our emotions down and they come out as a cancer,
or the volcano explodes and creates destruction.
Yeah.
That disembodied emotion that we see people expressing in the world. You know, I learned that from Anne Berube very powerfully. She uses the volcano metaphor.
Yeah.
And yet anger is a real, valid, and valuable emotion.
Well, and back to our patriarchal upbringing, you know, if you can't be nice, don't say anything at all. And that's what I grew up with, is to be nice and polite. And so I'm still fairly unskilled with anger, and I'm a fire type. Like, I've got fire in my belly. It's part of my constitution. And it's been a really interesting journey, my relationship with anger, and learning how to express it in appropriate and effective ways.
You remind me, when you talk about that, of the expression, "you're too much." And I remember being in a retreat, sort of a spiritual retreat at Wind Horse Farm, which is one of my favorite places on earth.
Amazing.
And realizing that idea of anyone telling you that you're too much. I was listening to someone else tell a story about a memory from when they were young, when someone told them they were too much. And I was like, oh, if someone thinks you're too much, then it's important for you to realize, to really embody the idea that I'm too much for you. I'm not too much. But it's about your message to me that I'm too much, whether too angry or too whatever, is about you not being able to handle me and not being able to figure me out.
Right.
And so I always like to think about that. Yeah. So, you know, you have a lot of fire. You might be too much for some people, but that's about them. It's not about you.
Yeah, interesting. And I think culturally we're not comfortable with angry, outspoken women. So, yeah, there's an adjustment period, I think, for everyone. And anger can sear, it can burn the ones we love most. So, yeah, I've learned that the hard way.
Are you afraid to show anger in front of your kids? You've said you're comfortable showing grief. How do you feel about showing anger in front of them? Because you must have a lot of it.
Yeah, and I think I've managed that I've done a lot of house cleaning. It's just, you know, having my house in order has been really important for me as I go through, you know, this internal landscape that is so out of control. At least I can have my house in order.
Oh, literally your house in
Literally.
order, you mean? Oh, interesting.
And so, you know, kids don't care about that. And so that has been a source of anger for me, and it's just a really messy time. It's so messy and confusing, and every day is different, and sometimes I do have anger outbursts with them when they have different priorities. They're teenagers now, and so they're immersed in their own drama as they need to be. And so I do my best to communicate non-violently, communicate skillfully, and it doesn't always happen. But one thing that I have become comfortable doing is apologizing.
I was just going to say that. I was thinking, that's like me, because I definitely get angry, but
Right.
I'm good at apologizing.
I'll own it, and I'll own it. And they know that what our family is going through is the worst mass shooting in Canadian history. So it doesn't give me permission, and yet it reminds them of the gravity of the situation. Yeah.
When you look ahead, and I know you're in this period of reflection and tenderness right now, because you need that. I can't imagine, how much tenderness and stillness you need. But when you look ahead to what you want to accomplish in the world, and I use that word accomplish really specifically, it's not accomplish in the type A way you might have thought of it in your 20s. I mean, in terms of service to the world,
Yeah.
what do you want to accomplish?
Yeah.
No, this is no time to hide your light. So,
Thank you so much.
what do you hold in your heart going forward to help the world with?
I think right now I'm still in shock and disbelief, and if I overthink it, it overwhelms me. I feel like I short circuit. Like when I sit with the reality of what has happened and our involvement with it is just, it quickly overwhelms me, and so I think a lot about Lisa and her legacy, and which is why I snagged this shirt from Winners.
Strong as a mother. Love it. Love it.
Great.
So great. It yelled to you, did it from across the room probably?
It really did, and this is her. She was strong as a mother. She was a mother bear. That's what drew her outside of her house on that night. He was standing outside, and she noticed these flames higher than the tree line, and had 2 kids and needed to protect them. And she went out to consult with the RCMP officer to ask what she should do. And that in itself is so fierce and so courageous. And the RCMP have spoken about the heroes, and they speak of her as one of those heroes, that she was so fierce and so protective that she would step outside the comfort of her house to protect her children. And so that's with me. She protected me much of my life. She was my protector, and she was fierce. And so I know that I have my own work to do, but her legacy feels really important for me to carry it on.
Does it feel like,
Yes.
there are 2 tree trunks that come together and
Yes.
intertwine, and
Yes.
you carry it forward?
Yes.
And what do you think her legacy is?
The last day of her life, she built a labyrinth with her children. I know, in her backyard. One of the last photos I received Saturday at 7 was a photo of this labyrinth that she had taken all afternoon to build with her children in the middle. And the labyrinth is a symbol of rebirth, of death and rebirth, and of coming into one's center. Mm-hmm. Taking that journey, that maze-like journey that doesn't always make sense, and going into the core of your being. And I think that was one of her final gifts that she gave me and her children. And so that is somehow, I believe, linked to her legacy.
So you just reminded me of something I need to write about for my book. But it's my experience the first time with a labyrinth at the Kripalu Center for Yoga and Health. And I started walking it, and I didn't understand the labyrinth. I thought it was more of a spiral. And for those who don't know what a labyrinth is like, it's actually very deceiving, because you are walking it and you seem like you're getting into the center, and all of a sudden it takes you way out to the circumference, to the outside of the circle again, and then you work your way in, but then just when you think you're making progress toward the center, you're back out. And it started to rain while I was walking this labyrinth, and I thought, oh, this is perfect. I'm a big metaphor gal, as I told you, but I just thought, oh, this is the path. This is the path that we walk as we are trying to understand ourselves and life and become more spiritual and more grounded and all of that. Just when we think we're really figuring it all out, something happens in life where we fall apart again, and we think, wait a second, I thought I was here and I'm still back here.
Right.
And
Right.
that for me was such a powerful moment in my life to say, oh, when you slip backwards and you feel like you've slipped backwards,
Yes.
you're still going forward. You're
Yes.
still making progress.
You're closer than you think.
And that's it. And beating yourself up, there's no room for self-judgment. It's all part of the process.
And the rain, how cleansing, of letting go.
I was soaking wet when I got back to my
wow.
dorm room. And I had the biggest smile on my face, because it was like the universe was saying, okay, we know you're a metaphor addict, so we're really gonna pile them on for you to get this. And I released baggage I didn't even know I was carrying.
Wow.
So the fact that you've given me this gift to tell me that's what she was doing on her final day is really like just hitting me in the center of my heart.
Oh, I'm so glad.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Lisa.
I know.
Thanks for being here.
And so the memorial that we're building is going to have a large labyrinth for people to walk. So.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course it is. Wow. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you for how you're showing up in the world.
Oh, thank you so much, Nancy.
And for your willingness to just be here. You know, I wanted you to feel safe, and that this wasn't about details of the horror. That's not what we were here to talk about.
That's what most of my interviews have been about.
Yeah, this
has really, you've helped me to really share Lisa's essence.
And I know there are so many people who loved her, parents and children, you know, who she interacted with as a teacher, and just the whole province now,
Yeah.
you know, holds her in this place of love for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Thank you.
thank you for being here. I always say at the end of these, stay tuned, because for me that means, you know, pay attention to your own tuning and spend the time and effort to keep yourself on an even keel and allowing emotion to move through it and so on. But as the teacher you are, what is your best advice for people staying tuned?
Driving here, I had an image of my brother, who is, as I said, a very large man in stature, and he was so funny. He was such not an overt comedian, but kind of a quiet comedian. He was just really fun. When he danced, he would jump and try and hit the chandelier, and one thing that he would often do, you know, here he is 6'5", and he'd come out with this tiny little high-pitched voice, like, funny. And I don't know why, but that voice came to me on the drive here, and that's part of my journey, is remembering the joy in life, because I am still here, and there's much to be grateful for, and humor just changes everything. So,
And finding laughter again
yes.
after the dark tunnel of grief, or even while you're in the dark tunnel of grief.
And that's so interesting to have that ability to laugh, because both Lisa and Jonathan were really fun and funny and childlike. So I'm bringing that forward, and I think that is important for all of us to take with us, because as adults we can become so damn serious.
You know what? You just brought me to another thought that I've never had before. And it goes with the idea that we shouldn't bury emotion. But if you think about past generations and their relationship to emotion and to grief, they buried people. When people died, they were buried. And I know that still happens sometimes, but more, I would guess that almost more often than not, people are cremated now.
Yes.
And
they're sprinkled.
And and when we bury someone, we don't necessarily talk about them and bring them into our conversation and into our daily lives. And I've been so inspired by the people in my life who have lost very close loved ones, and their names are spoken with ease. And I really try to do that because I believe that reminds us that, oh, yeah, they're still here.
Yes.
And if we, as long as we are aware of them, they're here. And it's when we shut that door, that they're no longer part of our consciousness.
True. Yeah, we can bring their best qualities with us.
Yeah. And when I talked to Elizabeth Gilbert, I asked her, and I've thought about this question, because I just worded it this way in the moment, and I've had a lot of people mention it. I just said, is Rhea walking through your days with you? Because she had lost her partner.
Yeah.
And she was like, yes, oh yeah. And she talked about how. But I've had a lot of people say that was a really interesting way to put it. And yet it was just, it just came through me. And I like to think of it that way. So I like to think of Lisa sitting here with us, whether she's represented in that painting or she's right in the booth with us.
Crazy.
Yeah. So thanks to both of you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, that was something.
Wow. It was so good to just be able to talk freely at this level and not be in the news.
I just thank you for showing up in the world the way you are.
Oh, thank you.
This is really special.
Yeah. Wow. You've really helped me to practice using my voice, because it's easy for me to do that in my structured classroom, but I do shy away from opportunities like this, fear of saying the wrong thing or not being perfect. So
I didn't really give you a choice, did I?
no, and that's good.